I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone here today. Bill, could you do the roll call and introductions?
Yes, Linda Muller.
Here.
Jeffrey Christ.
Here.
Giovanni Palladino.
Here.
Vincent Odock.
Here.
All right, and we also have, we have 4 out of 5 committee members present. Dean Tambury is excused absent. Staff, myself, Bill Fioravanti, Kelly Riley, Marty Barras. We also have Mr. Jose Rojas doing our AV, and we have our 3 council on. We have Susan Katzoff on Zoom. And we have our new general counsel, Lino Sciaretta and Rudy Zoda from Bleakley Platt, and we have Mr. Brian Sandvich, our monitor from Anshin.
Thank you very much. I would like to verify that proof of notice was made by our board chair, so that was duly noted. The minutes, everybody, I hope, had an opportunity to review the minutes from August 14th, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion, any corrections? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. A quick update on the bylaws and the personnel policy manual. So, I've reviewed them. The last time that they were presented was in 2020, and if you keep that date in mind, that was in the middle of COVID. I believe it would be in our best interest to instruct our CEO to have our new council review the bylaws and to ensure that they are compliant with where we are now in 2024, moving into 2025.
Absolutely. I'd like you to leave with it today if you don't mind. I have copies for you guys. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, terrific.
Okay, and the policy update, I reviewed those, and again, they haven't been updated since 2020. 2020 was COVID. There's a tremendous amount of information within the policy handbook that has references to policies that were enacted in 2020 and 2021. So I think there's some changes that will need to be done, and we continue to work on that. That is all I have on the bylaws and policy updates. If anyone has any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. It's a lot of paper to read.
For doing so. Thank you.
All right, there being no other business to bring before the governance committee, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Very good. Jose just needs a minute. Tell us when you're ready. Okay. We're ready to go? Okay, whenever you're ready.
Where am I going?
We're going to Orange County IDA governance.
Okay, fine, my paperwork, okay. I'd like to call the meeting in order for the governance committee of the Orange County IDA. Bill, could you do the roll call and again introduce our guests?
Absolutely. Linda Muller.
Here.
Jeffrey Christ.
Here.
Giovanni Palladino.
Here.
Dr. Vincent Odock.
Here.
Okay, 4 out of 5 members present. Dean Tambury is an excused absentee. Myself, Bill Fioravanti, Marty Barras, Kelly Riley are the 3 staff. Mr. Jose Rojas here doing our AV. Lino Sciaretta, Rudy Zoda from Bleakley Platt, Susan Katzoff from Bousquet Holstein, and Mr. Brian Sandvich, our monitor from Anshin. That's it.
Thank you. Proof of notice was duly made by our chair of the board with the appropriate amount of time, so thank you very much for that, Jeff. You all had received the minutes in advance, and hopefully you've had an opportunity to review them. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Is there any discussion, corrections? Hearing none, I'd like to call the question. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Abstentions? Hearing none, motion carries. New business, are you handling or is it going to Sue?
Going right to Sue. Sue is gonna, we've been working together on revising our UTEP. It was last revised in 2019. And Sue's been leading us in that effort, so I'm going to kick it over to her to tell you what's in front of you.
Well, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm assuming that you received in your packets a couple of documents. One is a recapture policy, one is a project approval policy, and one is your uniform tax exemption policy, shorthand, your UTEP. So it is the general municipal law requires you to have all three of these policies. You currently have a form of all three of these. They are, as they appear on your website, currently all encompassed within your UTEP. We have broken them out so that you have three independent policies, which is what I believe the general municipal law requires of you. And they, in large part, they stick with what you have had, capturing what was important to the board, and as Bill has been working with myself and Jeff to marshal through these agreements. But the way I would approach them is first looking at your project approval policy. So the project approval policy outlines the parameters by which you analyze projects that come before you. And you will see in section 2 of that agreement, it talks about the project assessment. It outlines factors. It's very clear that no one factor is determinative, but it gives you your guardrails. It gives you benchmarks. It tells you what kinds of things you're looking for, such as how many jobs are created, what is the demonstrated public support, how
Sue?
much private sector investment is.
You just pause for 1 second to make sure we're all literally on the same page, if you could. We're in the project approval policy, the second page of it?
Well, it starts on page 1.
Yes.
It's section 2.
So page 9 of your
Number
packet.
1 is.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're good, sorry.
I apologize.
No, we have a different numbered packet, so I just want to, I apologize, you don't have that copy. But we are with you now. We're on the first page of the project approval policy.
Correct. So you'll see that it talks about the members shall assess all of the material information, which is going to be your application. It's going to be your cost benefit analysis. It's going to be any correspondence Bill has. It will be information gained from your public hearings, and that sort of thing. But you read down this list, and these are the factors you're looking at when you analyze a project. And again, job creation. Is it in one of the industries that you have identified here in this policy that you're trying to attract? Those are your priority industries. We're trying to bring in more manufacturing. We're trying to bring in high-tech businesses. So as you go through this, this is just your guiding principle. This is what you use when you analyze a project to see if it's something you want to incentivize. And the exhibit was done with great involvement of the chair and of Bill to identify sectors and areas and types of businesses that you really want to try to incentivize to bring into Orange County. So that's what your project approval policy sets out for you. Your project approval policy works in conjunction with your UTEP. So if you look at the draft of the uniform tax exemption policy that's in your packet, and Bill, do you want to tell them what page number
Yep,
is
so
in the
that's just,
packet?
that's page 5 of the packet. So it's just back a little bit.
And as you're getting there, I'll just say that page 1 of your UTEP is pretty much what your UTEP is now. It sets out your statutory history. It talks about the purpose and a payment in lieu of tax agreement. It says all of that. And on page 2, it sets forth the different, there's 4 categories that projects will fall into. And depending upon which category they fall into will dictate the level of abatement that you're willing to give them. So it dictates the schedule associated with the abatement of the improvements relative to taxes, which is on the next page. So as you can see, if you were looking at a project that came before you and it fell into one of the categories on Exhibit A to your project approval policy, meaning one of those industries or sectors that you were really trying to incentivize, it would fall into category 2, Romanet 2, priority industry. And if you flip to the next page, the chart on the next page tells you what the abatement period would be for that project. So it's as simple as that in theory. You figure out where the project falls, and then you check on the chart what the abatement schedule will be. There is a separate category for what's called priority commercial and residential, which is really a project that has heavy residential component to it that provides for a component of affordable housing. Then you have job creation, where you have your mega projects, your Microns of the world, your Amazons of the world, where they're coming to a community and creating 100 or more jobs. I mean, that's a huge influx of jobs for a community. So if somebody comes in, if you have a Micron that comes to your neighborhood and they want to locate in Orange County, you're going to look at them and say, okay, you're creating 100 or more jobs. Here's the abatement schedule we'll give you. It's on the next page. And the only other thing I will note about this is in discussions with Jeff and Bill, we talked about projects that also eliminate blight by doing a historic renovation. If you have a building that's on the historic register, or if you're doing a project that is going to remediate brownfields, those are also things you want to incentivize. And so in working with them, we came up with what's called an additional abatement, which is in your UTEP. So if you're doing any one of these kinds of projects that would fall in any one of these 4 categories, and they also happen to be on a brownfield site, your abatement schedule will increase by 5 years. Or if you have a project that will also be a historic renovation of a historic building, something we're also interested in doing, preserving history, you will get an additional 5 years onto your abatement schedule. So that's the high-level overview. There is always a statutory right, and it is built into your UTEP, that if you have a project that comes in and is phenomenal for your area, and one that doesn't squarely fit into one of these categories, or comes to you and says, look, I can create all of this economic development for you, I have all of these wonderful bells and whistles, but I can't make it work without a 25-year pilot or a 30-year pilot, you always have the right to deviate. You always have the right to follow the procedure under the general municipal law that says, this project doesn't fit squarely in my UTEP, we would like to incentivize this project, we would like to give it a higher abatement schedule, so we're gonna follow the procedures set out in the general municipal law to do that. So that's a lot of information that I've given you. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know it doesn't seem like it, but we tried really hard to make it straightforward. And I would welcome any comments Jeff or Bill have in terms of the process or what we discussed or how we arrived at the policy that we did.
Historically, Sue, residential has been outside our parameters, but more recently, I think there's actually encouragement to have considerations, especially related to, did you use the word affordable? I think.
Yeah, it's based upon your annual median income, and it's someone earning at the 80% or less mark, which is really a lot of, well, at least here in Syracuse, it's municipal workers. It's people who work at City Hall, who work for the city, who, are making $50,000 or $60,000 a year. We're struggling to find them affordable housing in the city of Syracuse. So so here in the city of Syracuse, they have an industrial development agency, and they do a similar program. They actually changed their zoning code, so it's not even an IDA incentive anymore, it's part of zoning. And they are required to have set-asides for people at or below 80% of Syracuse's AMI. So it's specific to your county, but it's people get concerned that you're really that you're trying to squeeze in a LIHTC project or a very low income housing project, but that's not the intent of this. It really is workforce housing. It is allowing people who are in the public sector to be able to live in your communities.
I'd like to add, want to say something?
The AMI is what, county?
A county AMI.
So if there's a project, for instance, in the city of Newburgh, which might be lower,
Correct.
it's still based on the county number.
It is.
So it's
Because
not
always
specific
based
to
on-
the municipality.
Right.
I was just curious.
Absolutely. I'd also like to talk about these benchmarks, and again, it's 20% of the units would have to rent to people of 80% AMI or below. I went over this proposed amendment here with Adam Bosch, who's the CEO of Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. local think tank that has done a number of housing studies. I asked him what he thought of those numbers. He said the 20% is pretty aggressive, meaning that
Okay.
other IDAs that I've seen have only required 10%. However, the sweet spot in terms of AMI seems to be closer to 60%. So what he had suggested was an either or, that 20% of the units at 80% of the area median, or only 10% of the units for workforce housing, but at 60% AMI. So that was an option that I thought I wanted to propose to the board, kind of an either or. Could you see that working, Sue? Or any concerns there?
No, I totally agree, but
Okay.
what I would suggest is if he thinks the 20% number is aggressive, which I don't necessarily disagree with, then just make it 10, because it's at or below 80%. So if you have a 60% AMI person earning at AMI, it still qualifies.
Yeah, if we did the or, the
You know what I'm
idea
saying,
would
the way it's
be,
drafted?
yeah, absolutely. If we did an either or, then the idea would be, if it's only 10% of the units, then we require you to go as low as 60%, where you're targeting lower income people. At 60%. I understand that 80 fits that as well, but it would be a more stringent requirement that they more aggressively, rent to people of lower AMI.
So you would set the cap at 60%.
Yes.
That would be
Exactly.
the threshold.
Well, that is a policy decision, and
Mhm.
if someone in your community who deals with the population believes that that is the appropriate AMI number, I mean, that's just a policy decision.
Yep.
It's not a legal decision.
Sure.
Is that what workforce housing is in Orange County? Like, people who work at the government center, not the county exec, but the secretaries and the DPW workers and people who are working for the municipality.
That's
Are
what-
they 60 or 80?
That's what he defined at 60.
Okay.
Well,
Seems low. Yeah.
Do we know what it is currently in Orange County, the AMI?
It depends on the size of the family. It's something like 74,000 for a family of three, something
Right.
like, so, and that's of course the median. All right, that's one of the areas that we want to have some discussion around. Job creation is the other one. We actually started at the idea of 50 jobs, but just with some of the sizable job creators we've had here, we thought we needed to raise the bar a little bit. And it does require, it's not just any jobs, it's jobs that do have proper benefits, healthcare from day one, other types of incentives like retirement, education, some of the things we are seeing in some of the more aggressive job hiring proposals. Something else I wanted to share. If we could skip to the project approval policy, page 11 in your packets, it's page 3 of that policy. This is where we've tried to identify the NAICS codes, the North American Industry Classification System. Manufacturing, I had all the NAICS codes for microchip manufacturing, everything of the like, advanced manufacturing. But really, after some discussion and some deliberation on it, we felt that manufacturing, we want to keep manufacturing altogether as a priority industry for us. It's the way it is now. It's a 15-year pilot, so it's the same schedule. And to me, there's a big push to reshore manufacturing to the U.S., and we want to be a part of that. We want to make sure that those manufacturers land back here in Orange County as well. So that's the idea. We did add information as another kind of high-tech component there. But otherwise, manufacturing, the general 31 to 33 encompassed all the advanced manufacturing as well. The next one is bracketed agricultural, because we've been debating it, and we left it in there so that it would prompt further debate. But there's just a question of, do we want to prioritize, and again, in this case, a 15-year pilot, prioritize even traditional ag? Jeff and I were very much interested in ag tech type projects, where you're seeing oversized greenhouses and a lot of technology involved. But we have to find a way to parse that out if that's exactly what we're trying to incentivize. Otherwise, there's an option just to take this section out altogether if we don't think agriculture should be one of our priorities. I do certainly respect it and honor it as a real legacy industry. It's been very important to Orange County, but landscape is changing. So, but it's important enough that we want to have it on here for some discussion.
I might just jump in with a comment on that.
Sure.
One thing I was wondering, and I think it came up on our call, Sue, life sciences, does that fit more in high tech, or is that, I think it's partly agriculture, potentially, and I looked up a definition, and it says the simplest way to define life sciences is the study of living organisms and life processes. And that includes biology, medicine, and agriculture are obvious examples of the discipline. And partly, Bill and I know from our Innovation Summit in Syracuse a couple weeks ago, how much is going on in technology, but those life sciences, medicine, and food production. We heard one guy, or I did, you weren't in that, were you in, did you hear Reason?
No.
This one gentleman, his name was Reason, and he was obviously an intellect. And he has in his vision, and he seemed to have some strong documentation, their goal is to stop aging, which was a concept I never even thought of before, but to correct things that are gonna get you eventually, and just through genetics and various avenues, stop those from, whether it's cancer, plaque buildup in your arteries. He said they're moving towards heading them off. It's not fixing it after you get them. He said medicine today is about fixing the problems you have. This is about preventing them from even occurring, so it's an interesting concept.
So that was, if I jump in, I consider that biotech, it's life sciences, as you said. The NAICS code for that is 5417, Scientific Research and Development Services. Whenever you talk about life science manufacturing, pharmaceutical manufacturing, that falls under 33. So that's under, on page, our first section of page 11. And then on page 12 of the packet, professional services, back office, and data call centers, you see 54 is in there. So that includes all scientific research and development. That is all in there. And that section altogether, by the way, it does include scientific, but to me it includes back office, data, call centers. To me, those are professional types of jobs. It reminds me of a MediaCom, which is actually all too rare in Orange County, where you can have kids go to college and come back and work in some professional environment rather than blue-collar work. So it doesn't work for everyone. If you're gonna move an insurance office of 10 people here, it's not gonna be worth the cost of the incentives. But if you're gonna bring a call center or a back office finance out of Westchester for 100 people, then it's worthwhile, and I think those are jobs we want to attract. So that's why that's in there as well. Adaptive reuse and community development is below that. And then if I could just turn your attention to page 13, it's the last section, I believe, that I wanted to cover, tourism. So it's sections, NAICS code 71, arts, entertainment, and recreation. That is the next Legoland, it's a dinosaur park, it's things like that. What it is not, though, is a hotel. A hotel would be standard. We pulled hotels out, and they would be under the standard definition.
Why did you pull the hotels, just out of curiosity?
Just because we didn't think it would be necessary to be a 15-year priority, and they would still be eligible for a 10-year pilot. They'd have to demonstrate that they are a tourist destination. There has to be a study accompanying it, or some supporting evidence that that it's necessary, really, that it's actually attracting people for tourism. But the way it's built now would be under 10 years.
What would you do with a mixed-use hotel that has indoor water park plus the hotel?
Well, like a land.
A little different, I'm thinking Wolf Lodge.
Right.
Where would that fall?
I'm thinking I'd probably defer to council, but I think we want to parse that out somehow.
Yeah, that one's a hybrid almost. It's like,
Hybrid.
yeah, pull that. And the other thing too is like agritourism. Would that go into agriculture, or would you keep that in the tourism? Because that's also something we see nowadays too.
Oh,
So-
good point.
Then I'm dealing with an
I
agritourism.
think that's under
project.
tourism, agritourism.
Yeah.
What about a hotel with a civic center?
I'm looking at page 12 or page 4.
Yeah.
Now, other services, what are these categorized under other services? Like what?
Which one on page 12? I'm sorry.
I'm looking at 81. That's sector number 81.
Other services.
What are the things we might include in that?
That's a good question. I actually didn't research other services. Sue, I think you added that one. Do you know any background on 81 other services from page 4 of the project approval policy? It's under the professional
I'm
services.
sorry, I was, go ahead, Bill, I can hear you well, but I couldn't hear Dr. Owen.
Okay, yeah, Dr. Orek was asking about page 4 of the the project approval policy. The section at the top there, professional services, back office, data call centers. And then if you look under the NAICS code box, what is 81 other services? I didn't add that one, I don't think.
We need to look at that, I need to pull it up, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay. I could research it.
I'll try to do it while you're talking. And
Okay.
Linda, did you ask like what would a Great Wolf Lodge be?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
That would fall under tourism. I assume that they could demonstrate what they needed to, assuming they can satisfy the general municipal law, and then they would get a 15-year pilot.
thank you.
You're welcome.
And what about like, I don't know, data centers, for example, are you that as high tech? Bill?
Yes. Data centers, the question, under high tech. That's something you have a lot in Rockland, right?
We see
Lot of
a lot of
activity
that,
around
I didn't see the NAICS code for that, because, data centers that would be separate. Because you have data in professional services, but I don't think you mean data centers, or probably more along the lines of high tech.
Actually, data centers is under information, so under 51, under that manufacturing.
So
Okay.
you're doing that? Okay.
Yes.
I was wondering what information was.
Yeah. Information, software development, software publishing,
Good, thank you.
computer infrastructure, data processing, web hosting, all of that is 51 information. Thanks for asking that, though. I wasn't totally clear on that, but it is.
This is very
Bill,
helpful.
you think 81 came from me and not you?
You know, I just don't see it on my list of what I sent you, but it does, yeah, it does. And when I look it up,
It's
it's what,
very general.
it is very general.
We
And I
might,
almost don't, I think you might want to take it out.
or define it better, like data centers and so forth.
Well, for 81, which is the other services
Oh,
under,
other services,
back
okay,
office.
yeah.
And I've got under 81, it shows maintenance of equipment and machinery and vehicles, laundry services, barber shops, religious organizations, grant making, civil and social organizations, professional, political organizations, private households is under 81.
Doesn't
Yeah,
seem
it
to
just
fit.
doesn't seem
Yeah.
like it's the right fit.
Yeah. All right, so
Good-
we're gonna
good
X
point.
that.
Thank you, Doc.
Great, yeah, good catch, Doctor, thank you. Great. Can I ask Giovanni, as Giovanni works for a developer, so back to the housing piece, would you see these, we want people to take advantage of this, we're trying to actually, move the needle with the housing prices. Would these, if someone that works in this space, do you see these as being attractive?
Yeah, if there's an incentive, absolutely.
Okay. There's one other thing that I mentioned to you on the phone that Adam Bosch raised was, he said sometimes developers are concerned that they want the pilot to extend as long as their financing, maybe as long as 30 years, which is not something we're gonna get into.
Right.
So if this is only 15 years, but your financing is beyond that, do you see that as a
Well, I can
stumbling
only
block?
speak to our specific development company. We very rarely go out 30 years.
Okay,
We're typically 15 to 20.
okay,
Depending on what's happening with the economy, what's happening with the interest rates, they're constantly reevaluating, refinancing, maybe possibly taking equity out. So I don't know if a 30-year term, I've never heard of a 30, I don't think that's something that we would ever ask for.
no, I don't think, yeah, I see,
Typically, we see around 20.
okay,
A 30-year term is almost always associated with a low-income housing tax credit transaction, and why they say that is because the regulatory agreements associated with those restrictive units last for 30 years. And so sometimes the agency providing the tax credits requires that your other structures remain in place for 30 years, but that's not what you're trying to do. But to the extent you want to lower it to 10%, that's gonna make the pro formas easier on developers. So there will be developers who won't make the numbers work at 20%, just given the economy right now. But they should be able to make it work at 10.
Definitely more palatable.
right. I do like the or option, the either or option. 10 at 60 or 20 at 80?
60 or 65?
60.
I think it depends on the size of the project.
Yeah.
Can we write it so that there's flexibility that says no less than and no more than? Instead of trying to put us into a bucket?
Yeah, Linda's asking if we could write it with, no less than, no more than. there's a way to write the language that leaves it more open?
Linda, can you say it again, what you're trying to achieve?
So we've got two things that are sitting on the table, right? 60% and 80%. Is there a way of putting like a floor and a ceiling so that each project can be looked at individually and then determine what the needs are for the project to come to fruition?
A lot of times what you will see is average. You will say you have to reserve so many units, for people at between, no more than 80%. So you could have someone at 30% and someone at 80% as long as they average to 60. So that's how sometimes you hear it, manipulated is the wrong word, but that's how some programs work, that you have to have an average AMI.
Okay.
So you could rent one apartment to someone at 80 and one apartment to someone at 40, and you're gonna average to, at least 60.
But I do want to be clear that this would be, I want to be clear that this would also attract potentially market rate projects that then build in an affordability
Correct.
component to it. So I don't want to exclude
That's what you're
that.
hoping for.
Exactly.
Right.
We're hoping to
So
encourage a
you want,
workforce component.
in my opinion, because this is new for you, you want to be less restrictive.
Yes.
So if, in my opinion, what I would maybe encourage you to think about is just putting 10% at no more than 80. Because then, you're gonna give the most flexibility to your developer to try to make their numbers work. And if you see in a year, my God, we've had 30 people walk in here and create market rate units with a 10% set aside at 80%, then you can try to lower it. Then you'll know that your numbers work. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Okay.
But again, it's a policy decision. It is not a legal decision.
Okay.
Does that become a requirement then? The 20% or the 10% has to happen?
Yes.
And okay,
To get,
so that's
to get
not,
that scheduled.
there's no discretion with that.
No. I mean, not the way it's written.
So if you say 10%, you would say at least 10%?
Yeah.
Or at a minimum 10%?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, someone can do more. No one will, but someone could.
Never know.
And the reason I say that is because these really are market rate projects that you're incentivizing someone to put in
Yeah.
a set aside.
Yep.
And so, if you're a developer, you wanna have your project have the greatest ROI, so you're gonna have as many market rates as you can. But this puts a dent in it, so at least you're trying to create an affordability component, again, for, the workforce.
Okay. Can I jump to ag for a little bit?
Sure.
Do we think this is a section that belongs in priority? Do we need to, if so, do we try and whittle it down to a specific aspect of it that is more attractive to us?
I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would be. Are we saying like a farm that wants to come in and go back to doing dairy?
I mean, that was an example I used, and especially when I was trying to argue as a devil's advocate that, not wanting to give 15 years to somebody starting a dairy farm.
I don't think we should turn our
Yeah,
back on ag.
Yeah, that I agree with completely. Go ahead, Sue.
I want to make sure everyone understands how the exhibit works, because the exhibit the main categories are on the top of each section, right? Like high-tech manufacturing, agriculture, and food processing. So then you have the individual enumerated factors, and then you have the NAICS codes as one factor. So you can fit into either or and get the benefit. That's how this is structured. It is narrowing the NAICS codes, but it is giving you a general category. So if you had someone that was before you that was doing an agriculture project that did not fit in to sector 11 or sector 31 to 33, but they met these other benchmarks, you could still incentivize them with this schedule. That's how this is drafted. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that.
So there's some flexibility built in basically.
yeah.
Correct.
Well, one thing that gives me additional comfort with the life sciences is parts of that fit in
Yeah.
other categories. And
Exactly.
something I pointed out in our meeting with Sue agriculture gets some tax abatements on real estate now if they qualify and the parameters are pretty wide open. Where if you're in a high land value area like Orange County, Dutchess County, you can apply for an ag exemption where your land is valued at the agricultural level and you don't pay for the full market value.
But it would also incentivize someone like you that might want to bring in some processing, right? Onto your property that you probably wouldn't do without some sort of incentive.
And if it's a more commercial, then it doesn't qualify for the ag value.
So,
Even if you're just, for us, packing for other farmers puts us in a commercial category. So in that case, and we have one project potentially in food processing, I think. So there, I think it's a different concept, and the food processing of this one with ag, I think, is an important one to include. And that would come under the 3133, I think. Manufacturing
Yes,
and
correct, yes,
fit
correct.
in
Absolutely.
yeah. So you-
some other categories, so
Find it
I
in
don't
there.
know if we have to list it separately.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
And also, for true agricultural kind of special use buildings, there's an automatic 10-year real estate exemption, 100%. So there's some things for the more, how should I say it, the more basic farmers, that they have some
Yep.
tax abatements.
I just don't want to turn our back to
No.
agriculture at all, because
Definitely.
as much as we're global, I think food is going to become very regional.
Oh my God,
Big time.
It's starting to happen already.
it is. Yep.
And just a reminder, if ag isn't included in this priority section, it's still 10 years eligible.
Okay,
As
good.
long as it meets all the right
All right, yeah.
requirements, so keep that in mind. We're not completely turning our back on it, it just wouldn't be a priority at 15 years.
Oh, that's awesome. Very good.
Keeping it in gives us some flexibility maybe to more easily accommodate a particular project, but it may fit elsewhere anyway, so I don't know what to say.
I'll defer to the farmer.
Yeah, okay.
For sure. How about those kind of bonus 5 years for adaptive reuse of a historic property or a brownfield site?
I think it's a great idea,
Me too. Totally.
very important.
Great, absolutely. So-
And those types of uses have special challenges. And it typically is important for a community to get them reused, remediated, and viable again.
Especially with the cities in our county that have all these
Oh
historic
my God,
buildings,
yeah.
and they need all the help they can get. I think this is very.
The
beneficial.
villages too.
The villages there,
Look at City Winery.
yeah.
What do you think about it needing to be on the historic register? Do you think that's the only catch I had? I don't know how else
Good
you
question.
identify it, but that's pretty limited, no?
Not necessarily, I
No.
mean, again, I used the city of Newburgh as an example.
Largest historic district in the state, right?
Not every building is on the registry, but the
Yeah.
area, the district is, right?
Right.
So by default, those buildings are considered historic. So do we
Right,
want,
but-
do we want that? The problem with the national registry, it comes with other
Restrictions.
restrictions, including the type of renovation that you do, the Department of the Interior, it becomes very problematic, and so I don't know if we should make that a requirement.
Right. You think, Sue, we could find another way to specify on a historic property?
Well, so Giovanni, could you repeat that for me, what your concern is? Because what,
That's a bad sound
how you
set
would
up today.
qualify now is exactly like Giovanni said first, you're in a district, a designated district. Any property in the district, you qualify. If you have a property that's eligible to be listed but just hasn't yet, you still qualify, or if
Okay.
you're actually listed. So it's pretty broad.
That's good then.
That's good.
Okay. I don't want that the label has to be there
Mm.
because of the restrictions that it starts to really pigeonhole the developer, whoever's doing that work. Because the level of restoration is very high.
Different. Just case in point, we renovated a dental center in the historic district, not classified on the historic registry, but we still have followed specific
Right.
guidelines on the exterior of the building, not necessarily the interior of the
Like
building.
if you're getting SHPO or the Department of
Mhm,
Interior,
right.
it's another layer for them.
Yep.
And maybe with maybe there's historic tax credits that they're going after, like Liberty Street School.
Sure.
Yeah, right.
Maybe, I don't know, I don't think it would be great if it has it, but to Sue's point, that if there's a way of understanding what that is,
Yes,
without actually having that classification, I think that's perfect.
okay,
But I love the idea of it,
yep, great,
it'll help with these old buildings.
great. Sue, anything else you want to comment about the capture policy? Anything that's changed, or you pulled out or added, or?
I just want to make everyone aware of it. It was originally included, a form of it, not exactly as it is being proposed now, but a form of it is currently in your UTEP, which is on your website. I also want to note before we leave the UTEP, the last page of the UTEP talks about your sales and use tax exemptions. This was from your original UTEP, nothing's changed. It just says it is your policy to grant these benefits if you find a project that qualifies. And the same with the mortgage reporting tax. So that, that's, should be in there, it is in there, it always has been in there, so that's good. The recapture policy, again, you are required to have one under the general municipal law. It is supposed to be a standalone policy, so we knew we couldn't amend the UTEP previously when we were waiting for the monitor to be appointed. But now that the monitor's on board and we're gonna amend the UTEP, we're gonna pull out your recapture policy, and I have made a few proposed changes to it, just really structurally. Under the general municipal law, an IDA is required to recapture sales and use tax if someone exceeds the amount that has been awarded. So those, to me, you have no discretion over. Those are state mandated. If you find that someone has exceeded the amount that you awarded, you have to recapture. So that's all set forth in Romanet 2 in your recapture policy. It is basically the general municipal law. I mean, I didn't make that up, that's how it reads. And then section 3, Romanet 3, talks about where you have discretion. You have a project, it comes in, it told you it was gonna create 10 jobs, it only created 8. Okay, well, what were the factors around that? So it just gives you some parameters by which you review a project to determine whether or not they have, in my opinion, substantially complied with what they told you they were gonna do in exchange for getting your benefits. So there's nothing earth-shattering here. There's nothing that should come as a surprise to anybody. It beefs up just a little bit at what you had, but it's basically what you're required to do. There is a section in here on annual assessment. You are required to do an annual assessment of your projects. Bill does that with you in large respect when he goes over the Paris reporting. You report on every project. You have to look at how much sales tax were they awarded, how much did they use. That happens during the construction period, and then Bill and his staff monitor job creation. They report on that to Paris. So it happens, even though you might not formally recognize it as your quote-unquote annual review. You are being provided with all of the information, but you should take a look at this, familiarize yourself with it, and when Bill is presenting that to you on an annual basis, think about if you have any questions based upon your policy for any of the projects that are active and that you have incentivized.
Anyone else have
I
any
do
questions?
encourage you to share with the full board. Everyone should be reading every policy, so they are independently familiar with whatever you ultimately adopt as your final policies. The board members individually should be familiar with them, so they should read them. And of course, they are required to be posted on your website, once adopted.
I don't have any questions, I have a comment, this is great.
Okay.
Very, very helpful,
Terrific, thanks.
excellent.
Great.
I might just bring up one slightly challenging issue. There's a few
Which
projects.
policy are you in, Jeff?
I think I'm in UTEP,
Okay.
but there's occasional projects potentially in this day of high tech and robotics, automation, where the end result of the project might not give you very many jobs. It might support a lot of surrounding industry outside of the county, outside of New York even. But the end result would be a good taxable base and potentially less costly products if it's being done with robots and stuff. We look at it every day in our packing facility. So I'm just wondering if there's an avenue for a project like that without the jobs. They're certainly not gonna get the extra 5 years for jobs. But,
Your project approval policy, and if I have not done a good job at explaining this part of it, job creation is absolutely, probably the #1 indicator of economic development. However, it is not the only indicator,
Okay,
and it
yeah.
is not mandatory that you have job creation to incentivize a project. So think of it this way, okay, that's simple. Assume you had a homelessness issue, and you had no housing. Creating housing, even though it's not a huge job creator, creates an enormous amount of wealth to your community, because
sure.
stabilized
Okay.
housing is the #1 key factor into people leading productive lives. Kids staying in school, I mean, the studies are plentiful, right? So if you have good housing, then your kids stay in school, they get educated, they go on, they have productive lives and become productive members of society, spending their money in your community and generating, income tax. So your project approval policy spells out, are jobs a factor you should consider? Absolutely. But no one factor is determinative when you are analyzing a project.
okay, that helps,
So I
thank you.
will say that.
Yeah, good point. Great.
One other thing I just want to interject here is just schedule-wise, is we have our next scheduled governance committee meeting is December 11th. That's Wednesday, December, it's a week before our December board meeting. I know we've been jamming some of these on the same day, but if you're able to make that, then it gives us the opportunity to discuss this one more time, in final form, so that hopefully you can recommend it to the full board for approval in December if we're ready. And it also, if it's its own meeting, we could also go over the other policies at the year end here. We could do that all in
And
governance.
Bill, I just want to
Doesn't work either.
remind you, you need to
The 11th
coordinate
works, the 18th
with the
doesn't.
monitor.
Coordinate with our monitor? Absolutely.
Yes,
Yes.
on the UTEP revisions, it's required that they have an opportunity to review and weigh in.
Absolutely. Not to mention notifying all the affected taxing jurisdictions, right, so,
Correct.
yes. Okay.
Giovanni, you're good for the 11th, but not the 18th.
I could do the 11th, the 18th, it's going away for the holidays. So.
Okay.
Jeff, are you good for the,
11th and 18th.
okay. Dr. O, are you good for both dates?
Dr. Oda, can you do Wednesday, December 11th for a governance committee meeting?
All day of the week?
Wednesday?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It does seem important to have it a period ahead of the next board meeting.
What time would that be? Same time?
I was thinking 4 o'clock if we could do it, but I just gotta make sure it works for you.
4, I'll
Yeah,
make
get
it work.
down here. Yeah, okay.
So 4?
Just to give us adequate time before it gets too late.
That works.
4 o'clock on December 11th.
Yep. So out of committee, we're gonna be making a recommendation to the board that they review the documents, bring any questions back to you for consideration,
Sure.
and then we'll bring it back on the 11th to finalize, to bring forward at the board meeting.
Terrific.
Okay.
Perfect.
With the expectation we might be able to approve it on the 18th.
Yes.
Yes.
And Sue, let's say we wanted to approve it December 18th, we're looking ahead to that. We start notifying the taxing jurisdictions like as soon as Monday, is that soon enough?
I'm sorry, what was the date of the December meeting?
18th,
Yeah, that's plenty of time.
okay,
I wouldn't notify the taxing jurisdictions until after you've spoken with the monitor.
okay, yep,
And does that have to be
So that
final?
you're sure that you have a product that you're ready to move forward with.
I think we need to let them know, yeah, what does the notification include? It's really notifying them that there will be a public hearing?
You're notifying them of the meeting at which you anticipate adopting a new UTEP. So you have to give them, I will check the statute and let you know I don't know that it has an exact date, I can't remember.
And do we have to post, the public hearing of it as one of our typical public hearings?
No.
No, okay.
I can send you an email outlining the process, or if your new council is there, I'm sure that they know as well, but I'm happy to send you the process. I don't like to say the number of days out loud because sometimes the statute has one and then they amend it and it's gone, and I almost think it's absent right now, so I would recommend at least 10 days, but I want to double check.
It's usually 10 more than 30.
So she's saying you don't have to notify, notice it has that. Just talk to her afterward. Yeah. Okay, I think we're good.
Anything else we've talked about UTEP?
I believe so.
Okay. On the old business bylaws, the bylaws for the IDA are in better shape than they were for other organizations. So I do not believe we need general counsel to review these. There's just some cleanup, there's cleanup on the mission statement, some of the board responsibilities, and some titles in the officers category. So those will be highlighted, and we'll bring them during first quarter of next year to the governance committee for review, and then on to the board for final approval.
Thank you.
One thing that I think might be good to do sooner than later is to make sure the board has the sexual harassment training. I know that's very universal in requirement for different jobs.
Yeah.
And here the last several years, even for agriculture workers. And I think you can use one certified training to cover all your
Correct.
various positions.
So we will make sure that we have communications to the board that
Yes, thank
will
you.
be a policy, and that they should bring in a documentation. For those who don't have documentation, there's various opportunities
Yes.
within the community to take advantage of the training.
Second, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And then finally, on the personnel policy update, the handbook. The handbook has not been updated since 2020, as we've identified. There are things in there that need to be reviewed, and I'd like to make sure that we'll have our CEO get some second eyes on the handbook so that they're up to date with current regulations, up to and including the entire policy on COVID.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other business that needs to come before this body?
I don't believe so.
All right, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second. Yeah. Doctor, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we